According to Shakespeare, all the world's a stage. But for me, the stage is my world. Slightly romanticized, I agree, but you'll know why soon. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashi, and I am a manager of training and design at a skill set development company. As a part of my role, I train students in communication skills, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. But I'm not here to talk to you about these skills. I'm here to talk to you about that one place where I developed these skills. You all are looking at it. No points for guessing. It's the stage. So here goes. As a 2-year-old, we have a range of responsibilities. One of them happens to be publicly embarrassing ourselves by reciting that one poem we learned in nursery school every time we have guests over. I too was put in such a situation. But instead of denying or shying away from this huge responsibility I had in life, I was quick to graciously accept it. I barged in my room, forced my mother to help me put a wig on, and that one fancy velvet coordinated set I had, and I went out only to perform Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. This is how it all started. Before I was even introduced to the concept of a stage, I was creating one for myself. Sometimes by standing in front of the mirror, addressing my make-believe audience, and sometimes directing, bullying my friends to play their part as we played teacher-teacher. This unsustainable method of recognition went on for a while. Till one day, I was scouted for my talent. At the age of 5, I was finally going to be on stage. It felt like things were finally falling into place. I was certain this was my big break. I was chosen to be a tree. I had no lines, and all I had to do was stand in a corner. But the best tree I was going to be. So when the day came by, I put on my tree costume and did my part just as I had imagined. Once I had experienced what it was like to be on stage, I seized every opportunity to be on it. It even got to a point that I crashed a lovely couple's wedding photographs just to be on it. When my mother realized this madness, it was a natural decision to put me in as many performance arts as she could. So at the age of 6, I started training in folk dances of India, Indian classical music, and speech, drama, and communication skills. Days went by where I'd rush after school because I had these classes lined up. I'd study for these subjects along with my school exams because I had their examinations to prepare for. And finally, when it was summertime, I'd devote all my time watching as many plays as possible. I remember watching this one play. It had dance, music, and drama. It was about a curious girl who would ask a lot of questions and whose answers she would often find in books. She inspired me. So that summer, I remember reading 26 books just because she convinced me to. Upon pondering what I had done, I realized the beauty of this platform. It spread joy, laughter, but most importantly, it moved people in ways they didn't even realize. So after that summer, I was as excited to be on stage as ever, but now I had found my purpose to be on it. I really wanted to create an impact, even if it was in the smallest ways possible. So after that summer, when I was presented with an opportunity to present our country in the International Folk Festival in Turkey, my dance team was the first one to do so. There were countries from around the world participating in this festival. There were parades, there were interviews lined up. We were even in their newspapers. It was a great feeling representing our country, showing our beautiful colors to the world. But I remember a particular moment where I felt that our performance had a greater purpose. It was when we performed in the cancer hospital for kids. The sheer joy on their face when they looked at us with our costumes on made all the countless hours practicing worth it. I started chasing this feeling a lot more. Around this time, I was presented with an opportunity to persuade 300 sixth graders so they would opt learning about Indian folk dances. They were an uninterested bunch of students who despised the idea itself. It was the first time I was given the stage for 2 hours. As it was the first time I was given a platform like this for 2 hours, I grossly miscalculated the time I would take to convey my points. 10 minutes into it, I had gotten to the end of the speech I had written. With 1 hour, 50 minutes to spare, I had to think quickly. So I did what seemed most natural to me and just spoke to them. I sat at the rim of the stage and just spoke to them. I asked them about their questions about dance, cleared their misunderstandings, and understood their ideas of dance. By the end of it, we learned a few steps from Pangi dance, and I watched them perform on that very stage. Once I entered college, my stage changed forms. I started doing a lot of street plays that would spread social messages. And one of these acts even reached 5,000 people. My stage changed further when I started teaching. My audience was no more random people I was interacting with for the first time, but a bunch of students who I had formed a bond with. My love for the stage was so natural, I thought there was no place for fear. But I couldn't have ever been so wrong. This journey, like every other, has had its fair shares of ups and downs. A few years ago, through social conditioning, I acquired the fear of judgment. The kind of judgment that said, I didn't belong here. I started getting worried about how I would be perceived. I was worried if I was good enough or if I had anything valuable to offer. This fear of judgment stopped me from being myself completely. The silly childlike qualities that I so happily carried with me wherever I went were now clouded with a plainer, supposedly normal version of me. When I stopped accepting myself for who I truly was, I stopped feeling for the things I felt so deeply about, especially the stage. Some things that seemed so natural to me started to feel fake. This fear grew into many monsters. The first monster to grow was called overthinking. Hours were spent in trying to demystify how and why I was feeling certain things, and in some cases, why I wasn't feeling anything at all. But since I'm a bit silly, my overthinking often went in only one direction. Instead of thinking of all the positive and negative things that I could associate with the stage, I only associated the negative ones. The second fear to grow was called inadequacy. With so many talented people around me, I started to doubt my abilities. It wasn't like I wasn't working on my skills, but my motivation to be better than I'd ever been before was slowly starting to die. For example, earlier my focus was on enjoying the process and giving my 100%. Now it had shifted to what the result of this process was going to be. The end rather than the means became more important. And finally came the third monster called confusion. Since I couldn't identify what was happening with me, I was constantly confused. A prime example of these monsters growing on me was when I started preparing for this speech. Being on this platform had always been my dream. And now when I was closest to it than ever before, I wanted to run away from it. And that's what I did. I ran by involving myself in other things. I ran till I had no choice but to face my fears. The thing about fears and these monsters in general is that they will chase you wherever you go, no matter how far. So the best thing to do is to turn around and face them. I remember reciting myself this Dwight Schrute quote, "I am ready to face any challenge that is foolish enough to face me." Now's the part where I'd love to say, so I faced these challenges and rose to victory. But I know I'll be lying. It wasn't as easy as they make it sound like in the movies. Till last week, I had close to nothing figured out about my TED Talk. As the day came closer, my fear grew bigger and my monsters hounded me more and more. So then, what did I do? I stopped running and simply turned around. To be honest, I had grown tired of this negative mindset. It wasn't helping me run any faster than my fears, neither was it helping me prepare for my speech. So now, instead of overthinking what could go wrong, I started thinking of what was going right. I pushed my mind to think of all the beautiful possibilities of being on stage once again, even though at first it was slightly reluctant to do so. But they say, right, fake it till you make it. So that's what I did. I faked positive thoughts till I internalized them and slowly watched this monster of overthinking disappear. I realized that the monster of inadequacy was actually feeding off the monster of overthinking. And now, when the overthinking monster had disappeared, inadequacy watched his annoying cousin who ruins every plot come back. Motivation. Yes, there was always going to be someone better than me. But instead of comparing or dwelling over it, I took inspiration from them. I stopped attaching myself to the goals of a successful speech and just focused on enjoying the little time I had left before it. I broke this task into smaller subtasks and just enjoyed the process behind it. I turned inaction into action and stopped overestimating my importance to create an impact on this platform. Now, when inadequacy and overthinking had left the chat, confusion, the weakest link, didn't survive too long either. Once I got rid of my monsters, I found myself in a positive mindset, one which allowed me to give this talk. By now, I'm pretty sure you're guessing why am I sharing all of this with you? Well, partly because I love talking about myself, but mostly to let you know the 3 lessons the stage has taught me. The first, say hello to your fears. Ever experienced sweaty palms and a racing heartbeat every time you're asked to be on stage? That's probably stage fright. Estimates suggest that 77% of the world faces glossophobia, a fear that encompasses stage fright. It's chasing most of us, even the ones who've been on stage all their lives. And if you don't believe me, then believe Mark Twain. He said there are 2 types of speakers, those who get nervous and those who are liars. So what can you do? Sit back, relax, and enjoy this process. You will make mistakes, but remember to fairly assess yourself when you underestimate your qualities. Once you have done that, identify the areas you need to work on. For example, I identified my 3 monsters. You can identify your own, start work on them, and seek help when required. And finally, no matter how scared you think you might be, show up 11 out of 10 times you're asked to be on stage. Because once you're on it, the stage is the first one to make you realize you matter. Your actions and words will have a newfound importance. And I hope that in times like those, you show the beauty that you keep so guarded within. Look around, the stage is everywhere. Sometimes in the form of a business presentation, sometimes in the form of an answer asked by your teacher, sometimes hiding in the game of dumb charades, and sometimes waiting for you as you hesitate to start your own cooking channel on YouTube. The decision to be on it is now yours. Thank you.